Welcome to the weekly virtual Capital Connection webinar. We're going to run through a lot of content this morning, but your Q&A is up there, so please feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A and I will try to answer them. If not, I will get back to you on the answer. I do want to thank our sponsors for this morning's virtual Capital Connection, Advent Health, Polk State College, and supported by Tampa Electric. So thank you so much for those sponsors that are making this possible. So I'm going to jump right in. So today's agenda, we will go through the week in review from last week, this coming week in Tallahassee, the federal updates, and just a few federal updates here, and then we'll hop into questions. If you have a question during the session, you don't have to wait till the end. Just go ahead and put it into the Q&A. Just a reminder, on last week's call, if you had a chance to pop in and look at that, we did run through the Chamber's priority statements for this session. And so you will see as we go through, I'll highlight some movement on some of those items. So one item that had made a lot of headway last week was COVID liability protection. You can see our statement on there in terms of how we've positioned it on our legislative priorities. But it is on the rules agenda on the healthcare side. So there's two bills we're watching. One deals with healthcare COVID liability and one deals with business liability. The healthcare bill is on the rules agenda for this week, March 11th. And then the House bill on healthcare is in judiciary on March 10th. Business liability is on the March 11th rules agenda, and it actually passed from the House last week already. So we've seen a lot of positive movement when it comes to COVID liability protections. And then here, this is the same slide as last week's, but it shows you some of the differences between the bills. So obviously, there's different thresholds for negligence and things of that nature. So just wanted to show this again this week, similar to the bills. Main Street Fairness. Main Street Fairness is speeding through the Senate. Hasn't really been heard in the House. This is the bill that has to do with the internet sales tax. So this is something that we've always had to pay, but the onus has been on the individual to pay. And I'm sure we all have been going and reporting what we've needed to pay on things we've purchased online. But this shifts that priority to the seller. It does have caps in terms of the amount you have to do in gross sales within the state of Florida, which I believe is 100,000. But we're watching that, and it has yet to be heard in the House, but we think it might end up, and I did not go back and check that this morning if it ended up on the Ways and Means this week, but we believe it'll be heard in the House shortly. And this is just to show you where there's only 2 states right now that have not dealt with that yet. And Florida doesn't normally like to be the last at anything. So hopefully we can see this get taken care of this session. So what's on the agenda for this week? So just to give you a little bit of a recap, we're up 163 bills that have been filed since last week. So we're almost hitting that 3,000 bill mark. So certainly a lot of things. So you'll hear me say, we're watching this. I didn't have time last night once all the agendas came on. I made it through most of the Senate agendas, but wasn't able to make it through all the House agendas. So there may be, again, something that you're watching that I don't have on here. So please let me know that as well. So again, most of you on the call know our legislative delegation, but just in case you don't, here's a reminder as who is in our legislative delegation. And then budget. We all know that the primary responsibility of the legislature is to set Florida's budget. And so this slide is from a Florida Chamber call I was on yesterday, but it just lets you know that although the budget is behind, it's not as far behind as they had predicted that it would be. So last week, a couple things to note. Jason Broder, who is a Chamber of Commerce executive in Sanford, he's got a couple bills, heavy business related bills that we're watching. One that was last week was Senate Bill 88, and that's relating to farming operations. And you'll see that it strengthens Florida Right to Farm Act, and you can see that on there. I thought this might be something that some of our members might be interested in, so I wanted to highlight that bill was was going through, and it's on consideration on the March 11th Senate floor session. Highway projects. So I actually watched this committee hearing last week. Maybe it's because I spent a lot of time in meetings on the MCORs, but there are 3 bills right now related to MCORs. That's the multi-use corridors of regional economic significance. This was a priority of Galvano several years ago, or actually, I guess it would be 2 years ago, and basically established those MCORs task force that looked at the 3 different toll roads going across the state. 2 bills that have been filed, House Bill 763 and House Bill 1030, would completely repeal that legislation and put the funding that has been earmarked for that back into kind of the general coffers. Senate Bill 100, which had a lengthy debate last week, that would repeal some of the MCORs language, but would reserve the funding. So it's being highlighted as kind of a compromise bill, if you will, in terms of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but looking at taking the recommendations that the 3 task force spent 1.5 years. It's funny, in the ledger, it said it was 9 meetings, but it was many more than 9 meetings, maybe 9 official meetings, but we had a lot of workshops in between. So it was an interesting debate to watch last week. I think this one's got headway. It's got support by a lot of organizations. And the main thing for us primarily is that you can't stop looking at funding for transportation initiatives. So we definitely don't want to see money's just put back in and not prioritized for transportation, if that makes sense. A couple education bills, and I'm just going to highlight these. Senate Bill 48 was a school choice legislation. It also had a very lengthy debate last week. And Manny Diaz is the sponsor of this bill, and it had a lot of debate back and forth. In fact, this was a several-hour debate related to consolidating the choice scholarships that you hear about. Of course, proponents say it reduces the burden on the parents. Opponents say that it diverts more monies from public schools. So this is certainly one that is being watched closely. House Bill 419 was refiled. It's early learning reform legislation, which proponents believe better aligns the BPK evaluation standards. And so just something to highlight. I know we've got a couple educators on the call this morning. Florida Senate Education Committee heard SB 366, and that broadens the scope of apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs and brings in state universities as partners for that. So certainly something that we're watching, and those kind of official language of apprentice and pre-apprenticeship programs. And then there's been movement on employment training as well. So veterans employment training. So you'll see those. And I know a lot of you follow those particular types of bills. There is a lot of, obviously, like every session, a lot of education bills and a lot of hearings this week on different education bills to pay attention to. So the week ahead, one that is interesting that was being heard this morning is the percentage of electoral votes required to approve an amendment. This would increase the threshold from 60% when we go to the polls and we vote on an amendment. It requires a 60% threshold for approval. So for example, the minimum wage amendment that passed last election was just squeaked by that 60% approval. This would elevate that to a 2/3 majority. So this would put it up to 66%. And so obviously that's something that everyone is watching. A lot of times you hear, for example, the Florida Chamber talk about the Florida Constitution shouldn't be as easy to amend as it is. And they always give the example of pregnant pigs, and that there's legislation in our Constitution about pregnant pigs. So that's an ethics and election now. Another one I saw on the agenda that I thought was interesting was the cottage food industry. And that essentially would increase the sales from 50,000 to 250,000 for something to be categorized under the cottage food industry. So certainly something that would be interesting to watch from the business perspective. Another bill that's on our current legislative agenda, House Bill 793, is measurement reporting. This bill was filed by Representative Bell, and this is a direct request from Polk County Public Schools to require certain reporting, such as the VAM scores, by July 31st, so the school district doesn't have to move things. And that was being heard this morning in early learning at 9:30. Residential property insurance, and this has to do with attorney fees and other sorts of things there, but this is a big question we've gotten from membership. That's being heard in judiciary this morning. And then we have a few economic developers on the call this morning from the CFDC. So I want to point out, as I know you are well aware, Senate Bill 982 and the QTI, tax refund is on the agenda today at 12:30, as well as the economic development public records, which would allow certain things to remain confidential of an applicant's personal information. And then one of the bills, Senate Bill 148, which has to do with potentially expanding the access for carrying out alcoholic beverages from restaurants. So it's looking at what happened during COVID and saying, should some of those things be put into law? So I believe Josie Tomko filed a similar bill in the House. So certainly something to look at. And then there is a preemption bill, as I mentioned to you last week. We as I see the preemption bills, I just like to call them out to take a deeper dive in. Today at 3:45 in the House Commerce side, there's a bill about home-based businesses and preempting to the state to regulate home-based businesses in terms of where they can be and what regulations can be put on them from the local government. So certainly something. And a similar bill is being heard tomorrow on the Senate side. Interesting bill, Senate Bill 1620, about autonomous delivery vehicles and low speeds and what parameters for speed and where they could be. That is being heard tomorrow in transportation at 8 a.m. Of course, with Florida Poly being in our backyard, something that we want to pay attention to. And then another item that is on our legislative agenda is Visit Florida funding. So that is being heard in Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation, Tourism, and Economic Development tomorrow at 1 on the Senate side. So something that, of course, is important to watch. We strongly believe that Visit Florida should be funded. People want to say, well, people are going to come to Florida anyway, but they won't if it's not in their face. You have to market a state. There's already been experiments about canceling that. I think it was Colorado that canceled their tourism marketing, and they saw direct impact on that. So several things over the next 2 days. As I mentioned, the agendas for Thursday came out yesterday. So while I was at the city commission meeting, I was trying to click through some of those agendas, but didn't have time to get through a whole lot of them. But one thing to point out for Thursday is the Senate will be in session at 2:30. There are already a handful of bills that are on their agenda, but 3 that we are watching closely. Senate Bill 50, which is the internet sales tax I mentioned, farming operations, and then craft distilleries. And this is actually an expansion of craft distillery industry. Sent this over to a potential craft distillery that we may have in the Winter Haven area soon, and they thought that it was a pretty favorable bill from what they could tell. So just want to point out those things. So a couple other things we're watching. These are not necessarily ones that we have taken a position on as a chamber, but I want to highlight them because I looked at who's going to be on the call today and thought you would find these interesting. One that's getting a lot of traction in the media right now is Senate Bill 86 related to student financial aid. And primarily because of the caveats within it regarding Florida Bright. So you're a student, you meet all the requirements for Florida Bright, you earn that 100% scholarship or that 75% scholarship, whatever it might be. And then you go to college and you select your major, and the Department of Education could say, well, we don't really think that major is going to lead to a employment opportunity for you. So we're going to scale your Florida Brights. And that's essentially a provision within this. And that has got a lot of people hyped up. I mean, I'm just going to say me personally, I went into college undeclared and I have a degree in hospitality management. And so there's just some feelings about, a lot of us probably got degrees in something that we're not necessarily working in that field, but it doesn't mean the degree wasn't valuable. So I think there will be a lot of debate around this. I'm actually going to try to tune into this one just from a personal side. I'm very interested. I didn't see any specifically identical bills. There are similar bills, not related to that, but related to dual enrollment and some other things on the House side, but I didn't see an identical bill yet. So certainly one that we are watching. Something that's been advocated for is about entertainment industry and film incentives. There is a bill, identical bills in the House and the Senate that are kind of making their way through, not heard in the House yet, on a film, television, and digital media targeted rebate program. So those economic developers on the call may want to take a look at that one. As I mentioned, the craft distilleries and then the public records are on there as well. So just other ones to pay attention to as we look forward through session. Federal updates. So one other thing on the state side, and I'm waiting for to kind of get myself up to speed on the federal before I send an email out to membership. But yesterday, Governor DeSantis did say that starting next week, he'll lower the age to 60 for the COVID vaccine. Of course, we've seen those restrictions get wheeled back and wheeled back. For example, teachers and childcare workers of any age can now get the vaccine. You can get a note from your doctor on the Florida Department of Health form certifying that you need the vaccine because of a high-risk health condition. But in terms of the general population, I believe starting on Monday, I believe it will lower to 60. So, I think there's hope for us all that haven't met those categories that at some point within the next couple months will be eligible to get a vaccine. So with the federal updates, we're obviously watching the stimulus plan. As you all know, in the wee hours, I think yesterday I was on a call, they talked about it being bar hours. When the bars close is when the stimulus package got out of the Senate. Of course, it's got to go back to the House. And I believe by all intents and purposes, it should be looked at today, but I apologize. I did not have time to go back and look at that this morning as I was paying more attention to the local stuff today. But as we get an update to that, we will send it out to membership on how they can take advantage of that. And as you know, the $15 an hour minimum wage was taken out of that by the Senate parliamentarian. We're watching infrastructure movement on the federal level. And then the PRO Act is something that we are watching closely. It would essentially remove Florida as a right to work state or lessen the impact of that. For example, requiring if you sought employment and gained employment in an organization that had a union, you would have to join the union. So certainly something that we're watching closely, joined a coalition with the Florida Chamber to take a look at that. But, there are I believe it's 27 states in the United States that are right to work states. So certainly something that could have a tremendous impact if it were able to make its way through. So with that very speedy update for you, I haven't seen any questions come into the Q&A yet, but I certainly want to open it up for any questions that might come through. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, if you have bills you are watching that I did not highlight here that you think it would be important, send it to me. I know that you may think, oh, Katie probably knows about it or the chamber probably knows about it. And we do try to keep an eye on everything, but there are almost 3,000 bills. So there may be something that we are not aware of and really, need to be paying attention to. So please let me know about that. And if you get an opportunity, thank our House delegation and those that voted last week for the COVID liability, because that can go a long way. I do see a question from Aaron on the right to work bill. You hadn't seen that. So yes, so it is called the PRO Act and obviously is gaining support or has support in the House on the federal level. And Aaron, I will send you after this call, I will send you the kind of letter that outlines the areas of greatest concern to the Florida Chamber of Commerce. But one of the provisions that certainly, it strengthens unions, if you will, is kind of where it's coming from. And so I also need to dive a little bit deeper to see how it impacts that right to work, but I will send you that right after this call, Aaron. Are there any other questions? Wait a second, see if anything else comes in. All right. Well, if you do have any other questions or something that you don't want to throw into Q&A and want to ask outside, please feel free to email me at any time. My email address is katie@winterhavenchamber.com. I'll be glad to look into it. And as I've mentioned, we have not just an incredible relationship with our legislative delegation in Tallahassee, but also the power of many lobbyists that we've built relationships with over the years. And so if we need to get more information, we can reach out to that. So as a reminder, we'll be doing these calls every Tuesday morning. So if you have anything, please let me know. We'll hop back on next Tuesday at 10 a.m. And we want to thank our sponsors once again, Advent Health Polk State, with the support of Tampa Electric, for helping to make this possible. So again, and thank you very much, Jennifer. Appreciate it. And have a great day, everybody.